You check your horoscope on your phone. Maybe you do it seriously. Maybe you do it ironically. Maybe you do it the way most people do, half believing, half laughing at yourself for half believing. Either way, you know your sign. Aries, Scorpio, Capricorn, whatever it is, you've known it since you were a kid. Someone told you what it meant about your personality. You either nodded along or rolled your eyes, but you remembered it. Here's what nobody told you. The system you're using, the 12 signs, the dates, the animal symbols, the personality traits, was not invented by Greeks relaxing on hillsides and gazing philosophically at the sky. It was invented by Babylonian bureaucrats in a city that no longer exists for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with personality. The original Zodiac was not a personality test. It was not a spiritual practice. It was not even about individual people at all. It was a warning system. Specifically, a warning system for kings, about crop failures, about military defeats, about which month the army should not march and which month the king should not leave the palace. The stars were not speaking to you about your love life. They were speaking to the state about whether the state would survive the year. And the story of how that bureaucratic Babylonian warning system became the thing you check on your phone, passing through Egypt, Greece, Rome, Persia, the Islamic Golden Age, and the Italian Renaissance before arriving in your pocket, is one of the strangest, most improbable journeys any idea has ever taken. And it starts not with a philosopher looking up at the night sky. It starts with a scribe in Babylon, writing on clay, watching the sky with the focused, anxious attention of someone whose job depended on getting the reading right. Because if he got it wrong, the king would know. Babylon, where the stars were a government department. Babylon, somewhere around 1800 BCE, give or take a few centuries, depending on which text you're reading. The Babylonians were arguably the most systematic astronomers in the ancient world. And the important word there is systematic. They weren't just looking at the sky with wonder. They were documenting it with the obsessive precision of people who genuinely believed that every unusual celestial event was a direct communication from the divine, and that failing to correctly interpret that communication had real, catastrophic consequences. They had a name for this practice: Enuma, Anu, Enlil. A series of clay tablets, eventually numbering around 7,000 individual omens that cataloged the sky with a thoroughness that wouldn't be matched until Tycho Brahe in the 16th century CE. An eclipse of the moon on a particular night meant the king of a particular country would die. A halo around the moon meant famine. Venus appearing in a specific region of the sky meant military victory or defeat, depending on exactly where it appeared and whether it was rising or setting. The system was entirely political. The sky was not speaking to individuals, it was speaking to kingdoms. This is something that gets completely lost in modern astrology's focus on personality and personal destiny. The Babylonians were not the slightest bit interested in whether you were compatible with your partner or what career you should choose. They wanted to know if the harvest would fail and whether it was safe for the army to cross the Euphrates. The scribes who operated this system were among the most educated people in Babylonian society. They kept their records with extraordinary care, noting not just what they saw, but when they saw it, what the weather was like, what political events were occurring simultaneously. They were trying, systematically, to find correlations between celestial patterns and earthly outcomes, and they did this for centuries. The Apin tablets. Around 1200 BCE, though describing astronomical traditions much older, the Babylonians compiled a set of tablets called Apin, the plow star. These tablets divided the path of the moon through the sky into distinct regions, each associated with a constellation. The Babylonians identified 17 constellations along the moon's path, not 12, 17. The reduction to 12 came later, around the 5th century BCE, when Babylonian astronomers made a mathematical decision 12 constellations, each occupying exactly 30 degrees of a 360-degree circle, divided the sky with clean mathematical precision that 17 never could. 12 fit the Babylonian calendar system, which operated on 12 lunar months. The zodiac was not discovered. It was designed, chosen for its mathematical elegance, adjusted to fit the administrative needs of a civilization that ran on 12-month calendars and needed celestial events to map cleanly onto terrestrial time. The signs themselves drew on constellations the Babylonians had been naming for generations. The great bull Gudana became Taurus. The lion Urgula became Leo. The scorpion Gertab became Scorpio. The goatfish Suhurmas became Capricorn. That strange half-goat, half-fish image that puzzles every modern person who looks at it. Babylonian. Completely Babylonian. In their mythology, the goatfish was a specific divine creature associated with the god Enki, god of water and wisdom. When the Greeks inherited the symbol, they kept the image because it was ancient, familiar, and by that point, traditional, but they had largely lost the story behind it. Most of the zodiac symbols you know were already ancient by the time the Greeks received them. They were already carrying layers of meaning, layers of mythology, layers of observations accumulated over centuries. The Greeks thought they were inheriting a Greek system. They were inheriting something thousands of years older. The personal horoscope. When did it start? The oldest personal horoscope ever found a clay tablet describing the celestial conditions on a specific night for a specific individual dates to 410 BCE, a Babylonian. By this point, Babylonian astrology had been running as a state-level operation for over 1,000 years. The personal horoscope was a very late development, a democratization of a system that had previously been reserved for kings. And even then, the earliest personal horoscopes were nothing like what you'd recognize. No personality traits, no love compatibility. Just the positions of the planets on the night of your birth, and what those positions meant in terms of what would happen to you, your fate, written in planetary positions, immutable. The Babylonian horoscope said nothing about who you were. It described what was going to happen to you whether you liked it or not. Egypt, when the sky became sacred architecture. The Babylonians watched the sky with the anxiety of administrators. The Egyptians did something entirely different. They built the sky into the ground. The alignment of Egyptian temples, tombs, and pyramids with specific celestial events is not coincidence or mythology. It is engineering. Deliberate, precise, intentional engineering in the service of a theological vision so ambitious that it literally required rearranging the landscape. The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned to within a fraction of a degree, with true north more precisely aligned than most modern buildings, achieved without GPS, without compasses, without any instrument we would recognize. The alignment was achieved astronomically by bisecting the arc of a circumpolar star, a star that never sets but circles the celestial pole. The builders watched the star's arc across the night sky, found its exact midpoint, and oriented the structure to that point. The Egyptians were not just watching the sky, they were encoding it permanently into the physical world. The Decans. Egypt's contribution to what would eventually become the Zodiac was a system called the Decan's 36 star groups, each associated with a 10-day period of the year. The Decan system was built around one specific astronomical event, the heliacal rising of a star, the first morning of the year when a star becomes visible on the eastern horizon just before sunrise. After a period of invisibility, the most important of these was Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, whose heliacal rising in Egypt coincided almost exactly with the annual flooding of the Nile. Think about what that meant for the Egyptians. The most important event in their entire agricultural calendar, the Nile flood that made Egypt the breadbasket of the ancient world, was announced in the sky. A star disappeared for 70 days, and then, when it reappeared on the horizon in the pre-dawn light, the farmers knew the flood is coming. Plant where you still can. Prepare. A star was literally saving lives every year. The sky was not a spiritual metaphor. It was a practical, accurate, life-saving calendar. The Egyptians gave Sirius a goddess. Sopdet depicted as a woman with a star on her head, not because they were primitive and confused astronomy with religion, but because the distinction between the star that tells us when to plant and the divine force that ensures our survival was not a distinction that made sense to them. The star's reliability over centuries, appearing precisely when needed, year after year, generation after generation, was itself evidence of the divine order that ran through everything. The Egyptian sky religion. The ceiling of the tomb of Senenmut, built around 1470 BCE, contains one of the oldest complete sky charts ever found. A map of the northern and southern skies, complete with decans, constellations, and planets, arranged not as a scientific diagram, but as a theological statement. The sky was the territory of Nut, the sky goddess who swallowed the sun each evening and gave birth to it each morning. Her body arched over the earth, stars decorating her skin. Death was not an ending. It was entering her body, traveling through the night, and emerging with the sun at dawn. Egyptian tomb ceilings are painted with the night sky because the people buried there were expected to travel through it. The sky map was not decoration. It was a map for the dead. And the constellations on these ceilings, you recognize some of them. Orion was Osiris, the god of the dead and resurrection, whose constellation rises just before the Nile flood. The Big Dipper was the bull's foreleg, a severed limb associated with Set, perpetually circling the celestial pole, never allowed to set because it was being guarded by the gods. Different shapes, different stories, same stars. When Babylonian astronomical knowledge flooded into Egypt during the Persian conquest, 525 BCE, and then the Greek Ptolemaic period, it met an already ancient, already sophisticated, already deeply theological skywatching tradition. The two systems didn't replace each other. They merged. The decans were eventually folded into the Zodiac framework, assigning 3 decans to each zodiac sign and producing a system of 360 degrees divided into units of 10. A system still visible in the structure of modern astrology's decan system, used by serious practitioners today. Egypt didn't receive the zodiac and adopt it wholesale. Egypt absorbed it and made it architecturally, theologically, cosmologically Egyptian. Greece, when the sky became philosophy. The Greeks received both Babylonian astronomy and Egyptian sky theology and did something characteristically Greek with them. They asked why. Not what do these celestial events mean for the king, and not how do we build the temple correctly aligned to this star, but why does the sky move the way it moves? What is the underlying structure that produces these patterns? Is the universe ordered by rational principles? And if so, can we discover what they are? This shift from practical skywatching to theoretical astronomy, from what does this mean to how does this work, is one of the genuinely world-changing intellectual transitions in human history. And the Greeks didn't make it all at once, cleanly, as a single decision. They made it through centuries of argument, revision, and increasingly sophisticated mathematical modeling. The problem with the sky: the stars move in predictable, elegant circles. Fix your eye on any star across a year, and it traces a clean arc. The constellations rotate around the celestial pole with clockwork precision. This was easy to observe and easy to model. The planets were the problem. The word planet comes from the Greek planetes, wanderer, because unlike the stars, the planets don't move in clean, predictable arcs. They slow down, they speed up, they stop entirely, they go backward retrograde, and then resume their forward motion. To a Greek observer without any knowledge of heliocentrism, planetary motion was bizarre, irregular, almost willfully chaotic. And the Greeks could not accept that the heavens, the realm of the eternal, the perfect, the divine, could be genuinely irregular. Irregular things were earthly things. The heavens had to be perfect. So they invented increasingly ingenious geometric models to explain why the planets appeared irregular while their underlying motion remained perfectly circular. Epicycles, circles moving on circles. Deference and equance. Mathematical constructions of extraordinary elegance and complexity, all in service of saving the principle that heavenly motion must be circular and perfect. They were wrong about the model, but the instinct that the universe operates on discoverable rational principles was exactly right. It just took until Kepler in 1609 to find the actual shape of planetary orbits, ellipses, not circles. What the Greeks did to the zodiac. The Babylonian zodiac was a practical tool. The Greeks turned it into a philosophical system. Hippocrates, the founder of Western medicine, connected the zodiac to the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Each zodiac sign corresponded to a humor, an element, a season, a personality type. This was not superstition. It was, by the medical standards of the time, a serious attempt to connect celestial cycles to bodily health. Aristotle provided the theoretical foundation. The heavens are made of a fifth element, ether, more perfect than the four earthly elements, eternally moving in circles. The celestial sphere influences the earthly sphere, causes ripple down from the perfect realm above to the imperfect realm below. This wasn't mysticism. It was physics, wrong physics, but physics. Claudius Ptolemy, writing in Alexandria around 150 CE in his Tetrabiblos, produced the most comprehensive astrological system in ancient history. He took Babylonian observational data, Greek philosophical principles, and Egyptian decan lore, and synthesized them into a systematic manual that would govern Western astrology for over 1,000 years. Ptolemy believed astrology was a natural science. He explicitly compared it to medicine. Both deal with probabilities rather than certainties. Both require skill and judgment in application. Both can be practiced well or badly. And the fact that they can be practiced badly doesn't mean the underlying principles are wrong. He was serious, careful, methodologically sophisticated by the standards of his time. And here's what Ptolemy's zodiac was actually about. Not personality, not romance, not career advice. Temperament, the natural, constitutional tendencies a person was born with, which shaped how they responded to the world. Not who you were in any moral sense, but the raw material you were working with, the baseline your choices operated from. The distinction matters. Modern astrology collapsed temperament into identity. Ptolemy's system kept them separate. Your sign was not who you were. It was what you were working with. That nuance got lost somewhere between Alexandria and Instagram. The Islamic Golden Age, when astrology became a science. There's a chapter in this story almost nobody knows, and it's the chapter that actually preserved everything you just learned long enough for the Renaissance to rediscover it. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century CE, Greek astronomical and astrological texts scattered, libraries burned, scholars fled. The sophisticated Ptolemaic system, centuries of accumulated astronomical knowledge, was in real danger of simply being lost. It wasn't lost. It was translated. Baghdad, 9th century CE. The House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikmah, one of the most remarkable intellectual institutions in history. Scholars from across the Islamic world and from conquered Byzantine and Persian territories gathered with a single mandate: translate everything. Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, Persian astronomy, Babylonian records that had been carried forward through Persian scholarly tradition. Everything. Al-Kindi, the first philosopher of the Islamic world, wrote extensively on astrology and astronomy, explicitly defending the rational basis of celestial influence. His argument: the heavenly bodies produce light and heat, which demonstrably affect earthly things. Plants grow toward the sun, tides follow the moon, the seasons change with the sun's position. Extending this observed influence to subtler effects is not irrational, it is extrapolation from observed phenomena. Al-Battani, working in Syria in the late 9th and early 10th centuries, produced astronomical observations so precise that Copernicus cited him in De Revolutionibus 600 years later. Al-Battani calculated the length of the solar year to within 2 minutes of the modern value. He refined the precession of the equinoxes. He corrected Ptolemy's errors. And here is the complication. He introduced a complication that modern astrology has never fully resolved. Al-Battani's precise observations confirmed what Greek astronomers had suspected: the zodiac is drifting. The precession of the equinoxes. The Earth doesn't just spin on its axis and orbit the sun. Its axis also wobbles slowly over approximately 26,000 years, tracing a complete circle. This wobble causes the position of the equinoxes relative to the background stars to shift gradually over time. In practical terms, the sun on the spring equinox in 600 BCE was in the constellation Aries. Today, it's in Pisces and moving toward Aquarius. Which means that if your birthday is in late March, the Babylonians who designed the Zodiac would call you an Aries because the sun was in Aries during their time. But if you went outside today and measured where the sun actually sits among the background stars during late March, it's in Pisces. The zodiac signs and the actual constellations, they were named after parted company around 2,000 years ago. The tropical zodiac used in Western astrology is fixed to the seasons. Aries always begins at the spring equinox, regardless of where the constellations actually are. The sidereal zodiac used in Indian Jyotish astrology tracks the actual star positions, which means if you switch systems, your sign shifts by 1, sometimes 2 places. Islamic astronomers knew this. They documented it precisely. They raised the philosophical question of which system was more valid and for what purposes. Modern Western astrology, by and large, has never given a satisfying answer. It uses the tropical system, which means the Aries in your horoscope has nothing to do with the actual stars in the constellation Aries. It's a symbolic position in a calendar, not an astronomical location. This doesn't necessarily make it meaningless, but it makes it something very different from what the Babylonians and Ptolemy thought they were doing. The Islamic scholars did something else with the zodiac that gets overlooked. They brought Indian astronomical tradition into direct contact with Greek and Babylonian traditions for the first time at full scale. Brahmagupta, the Indian mathematician and astronomer, had developed the sidereal zodiac system, tracking actual star positions centuries before the Islamic translations. His work, translated into Arabic as Brahma's Futa Siddhanta, introduced Islamic scholars to zero, to negative numbers, and to a zodiac system that disagreed fundamentally with the Greek tropical system. The result was productive disagreement. Islamic astronomers spent centuries debating which system better reflected celestial reality, and their debate drove observational astronomy forward in ways that directly enabled the European Renaissance and eventually the Copernican Revolution. China, the sky that never talked to Greece. Everything so far has been one story. Babylon to Egypt, to Greece, to Rome, to Islam. One thread, passed between hands, transformed but continuous. China is a different story entirely. Chinese astronomical tradition developed independently. Not entirely without outside influence, there is some evidence of Babylonian astronomical data reaching China through Indian and Persian intermediaries. But the core tradition, the mythology, the system of meanings, is genuinely, distinctively Chinese. And it divided the sky differently. Where the Babylonian, Greek tradition focused on the ecliptic, the apparent path of the sun, through the year Chinese astronomy focused on the celestial equator and divided the sky into 28 lunar mansions. The Shu. The moon takes approximately 27 to 28 days to complete one orbit. The 28 lunar mansions divided the sky into 28 regions, each one representing a single night of the moon's journey. Each mansion had a name, a governing deity, an associated animal, a set of meanings for divination. This was a completely different organizational logic. Not the annual journey of the sun, the monthly journey of the moon. The Chinese Zodiac. The Chinese Zodiac that most people in the West have encountered the 12-year cycle of rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog. Pig is not directly related to the lunar mansions. It operates on a 12-year Jupiter cycle. Jupiter takes approximately 12 years to orbit the sun. Chinese astronomers tracked Jupiter's position precisely and divided the sky into 12 stations corresponding to Jupiter's annual positions. Each year of Jupiter's 12-year cycle was assigned an animal. The animals were chosen through a mythology that doesn't survive in complete form. The most common story today about a race of animals summoned by the Jade Emperor is probably medieval in its current form, layered onto a much older tradition whose original logic is partially lost. But the 12-animal, 12-year structure operated on the same mathematical logic as the Babylonian 12-sign zodiac, 12 divisions of a cycle, mathematically elegant, practically useful. Two civilizations with no direct contact independently discovered that 12 was the most useful number for dividing cyclical time. That's not coincidence. That's mathematics. What the Chinese sky meant. Where Babylonian astrology was state-focused and Greek astrology became philosophically and individually focused, Chinese astrology remained fundamentally about harmony with cosmic cycles. The concept of Tianming, the mandate of heaven, meant that political legitimacy was cosmologically grounded. The emperor ruled correctly when he was in alignment with the celestial order. Natural disasters, floods, famines, military defeats were not random. They were signs that the cosmic alignment had slipped, that the emperor had lost heaven's favor. This sounds similar to Babylonian astrology, and in its political function, it is. But the Chinese tradition added something distinctive. The individual could also cultivate alignment with cosmic cycles through practice, through qigong, through timing actions to auspicious days and hours, through the geomantic system of feng shui that placed buildings and graves in positions that harmonized with the landscape's natural energies, which were themselves understood as extensions of the same cosmic forces visible in the sky. The sky was not just a warning system and not just a philosophical system. It was a model for living a pattern that, if understood and aligned with, produced health, prosperity, and harmony. Not by divine intervention, but by natural consequence. You aligned with the flow of cosmic energy, or you swam against it, and the difference showed in your life. This is a fundamentally different frame from any Western astrological tradition. It asks not what will happen to me, but how do I move through time wisely. The dragon. The dragon as a Chinese zodiac sign confuses Western observers who expect 12 mammals and birds. A mythological creature among real animals seems jarring. In Chinese cosmology, the dragon is the most auspicious of all animals, a divine creature associated with water, with the emperor, with cosmic power, with good fortune. It is not the fire-breathing, treasure-hoarding creature of European mythology. It is something gentler and more fundamental, the force of transformation, of the seasons' change, of water giving life. The dragon's inclusion in the zodiac is not an anomaly. In Chinese thought, the mythological and the natural exist on a continuous spectrum. The dragon is as real as the ox it inhabits a different layer of reality, But reality has multiple layers, and the zodiac spans them all. How it became what it is now. Somewhere in this journey from Babylonian clay tablets to your phone screen, something got lost. Several somethings, actually. The personality system, the idea that your zodiac sign describes who you are as a person, your strengths and weaknesses, the way you love, the way you fight, the way you approach life, is almost entirely a modern invention. Ptolemy described temperament, not personality. The Babylonians described fate, not character. The Chinese described auspiciousness and timing, not selfhood. The shift toward personality happened gradually, across several centuries, culminating in the 20th century. The newspaper horoscope. In 1930, the British newspaper, the Sunday Express, published a horoscope for the newly born Princess Margaret, written by an astrologer named R.H. Naylor. It was so popular that the paper commissioned a regular column. Naylor, needing to write something broadly applicable to a mass audience, rather than individually calculated charts, invented the sun sign column 12 brief predictions, one for each sun sign, applicable to everyone born in that monthly period. This was a journalistic innovation, not an astrological one. It required collapsing the enormous complexity of a full birth chart, which considers the positions of all the planets, not just the sun, into a single variable. It required making that single variable the primary carrier of personality meaning. Ptolemy would not have recognized it. The Babylonians would have been baffled. But it worked. People loved it. It spread to every newspaper in the world within decades. Carl Jung and the psychological pivot. Simultaneously, something more intellectually serious was happening. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, founder of analytical psychology, developed a deep and unorthodox interest in astrology. He conducted a statistical study of astrological correlations in his patients, and while the results were inconclusive by modern standards, his engagement with astrology gave it a new intellectual framework. Jung argued that whether or not the stars physically caused anything, the symbolic system of astrology could function as a meaningful map of psychological patterns. The 12 archetypes of the zodiac were, in his reading, representations of universal psychological types, patterns of the collective unconscious that appeared in mythology, in dream, and in the personalities of individuals. This reframing was transformative. Jung essentially offered astrology a way to survive the scientific revolution without requiring anyone to believe that Jupiter physically influences your personality at birth. Instead, the symbols of astrology are psychologically meaningful precisely because they are ancient, culturally universal representations of fundamental human patterns. You don't have to believe in celestial causation. You only have to believe that ancient symbolic systems can be useful mirrors for self-understanding. This argument in modified forms, often without acknowledging Jung at all, is the implicit foundation of almost all contemporary serious astrology. The actual stars. And underneath all of this, the newspaper columns, the Jungian psychology, the Instagram aesthetics, the personality quizzes, the actual stars, are still there. Still moving. Still following the patterns the Babylonians documented with such anxious precision 35 centuries ago. Still drifting, slowly, as the precession of the equinoxes continues its 26,000-year wobble. Somewhere in the constellation Sagittarius, there is a point that astronomers call Skra A times the radio source at the center of our galaxy. Almost certainly a supermassive black hole with the mass of 4 million suns. The Babylonians could not see it. Their clay tablets contained no record of it. The Greeks had no name for it. Ptolemy never calculated its position. But the strip of sky in which it sits, that particular band along the ecliptic, was visible to every sky watcher in every civilization we've discussed. The Babylonians called the constellations in that region by their names. The Egyptians incorporated them into their ceiling paintings. The Greeks built mythology around them. The Chinese placed lunar mansions across that section of sky. Every tradition, same patch of darkness. All of them knew, in their own way, that something important was there. They just didn't know what. Your zodiac sign is about 3,000 years old in its current form. In its deeper roots, the constellations, the star myths, the idea that the sky has something to say to the creatures living under it, it is older than writing. It began as a warning system for Babylonian kings and ended up on your phone. Between those 2 points, Egyptian priests aligning temples to stars, Greek philosophers trying to find the mathematics of the cosmos, Islamic scholars preserving and refining what the Greeks built, Indian astronomers developing a parallel system that disagreed about the fundamentals, Chinese skywatchers dividing the same night sky into entirely different shapes and finding entirely different meanings in it. Every tradition looked up at the same sky. Every tradition found something different. And every tradition found something. That consistency, the absolute universality of the human impulse to read the sky, to find pattern in the stars, to believe that the scale of the universe and the scale of a single human life are somehow connected, is worth taking seriously, regardless of what you believe about horoscopes. Because the question underneath all of these systems is not really about the stars. It is the same question that every civilization in this series has been asking in every video we've ever made. Is there a structure to this? Is the universe a random collision of matter and energy that produced, by accident, creatures capable of briefly wondering about it before returning to nothing? Or is there something in the way the universe is organized, some pattern, some principle, some order that connects the motion of a galaxy to the motion of a life? The Babylonians thought the answer was written in the sky. The Greeks thought it was written in mathematical structure. The Egyptians built it into the earth itself. The Chinese saw it in the flow of qi through landscape and time. None of them had telescopes. None of them had spectroscopes. None of them knew about black holes or dark matter or the cosmic microwave background radiation. But they were asking the right question, and we still haven't fully answered it.